born and raised in Turkana County, Kalokol Ward. I'm the firstborn in a family of 6. Yes, currently doing medicine and surgery at Moi University. I was born to a 14-year-old mom in Kalokol. 3 days later, she ran away, to look for better life. So I was raised by my grandparents. Growing up, all I knew was just doing chores, grazing, going to Lake Turkana, and education was never part of the picture until when I was 7 years old, when I started noticing kids going to school, and that's when I developed an interest to go to school. Even so, I started going to school, as a means of getting food, because school for me was just a place where I can go and get food. 2 years later, I'm 9 years, until one day I realized, I was the next candidate for marriage proposals, and that's when I ran away to Faith Homes of an orphanage where my mom's uncle was running, and that's when I started school. Term 1 I was in class 1, and then term 2 I went to class 2 at 9 years, and that's how I continued until 2010, when I reconnected with my mom once again, and I left the orphanage to stay with my mom at a place called Lokichar. I was in Lokichar Girls Primary School until class 6, going to 7. That's when my mom's big brother took me in, and I went to Lodwa. From there, I was in Kanamkemer Primary School, class 7 and 8. And when I was in class 7, my uncle started being violent, and that's when my head teacher, Mr. Bong Bernard, took me in, paid for fees, and catered for everything throughout class 7 and 8 until I finished. Then I went staying with my mom again in Lokichar, hopeless, not knowing what happens next after KCPE. And then when results came, I had 385 marks. Yes, and I was so desperate. The next thing that I was supposed to do was to repeat class 8, because there was no one who could take me to school. Little did I know, Mr. Bong, my head teacher, had applied for me Wings to Fly scholarship, and I managed to get the scholarship, and I was called to Alliance Girls High School. Throughout the 4 years, I was sponsored by the Wings to Fly and the Equity Bank Foundation. It was a struggle, but at that time, the schools were just kind of introduced in Turkana, so we could pay nothing at school until you reach class 8, where you're supposed to get to a boarding school. That's when you pay a small fee. So throughout the lower primary and upper primary school, we didn't have to pay for anything. The only thing we were supposed to get were just books and the normal requirements for school. When I was in class 7, I had just entered this school, and I was really performing very, very good. And one day we did an exam for term 2, and I was number 1 and a new student in school. And Mr. Bong gave me a very small present. It was a book called Think Big by Ben Carson. And he told me to read the book and come and do the summary for him. That's when I realized, like, me and Ben Carson have, a sort of a very similar story, where the mom was struggling. Ben Carson was, called dumb because he was not very bright. And through the challenges, he still managed to be a very good doctor, a known neurosurgeon all over the world, and that's what inspired me. I didn't know what it takes for one to be a doctor, but through the Ben Carson story, that's when it crossed my mind that I want to be a doctor. I joined Alliance Girls High School in Kikuyu, February 2015. When I joined Alliance, at that time, there was only one girl who was from Turkana, and she was in Form 4. so we were not very close. So adapting into the system was very hard for me. The first thing that came out strong was the culture shock that I faced. Growing up in Turkana, English was not the main language. Like, even sometimes you'll just be taught English or mathematics in, a vernacular language. So when I went to Alliance, the girls were speaking English, and I'm there, I don't even know how to speak English fluently. Like, I'm one kind of a person, I'm so good in expressing myself when I'm writing things, but when it comes to speaking, it's a challenge. So finding girls speaking English, and I could not fit into the system. So many of the times I just find myself quiet in class. I'm not answering questions, I'm not speaking to people, and with time I think people realized I don't like speaking because I'm not so good in English. So someone will speak to me in English, I will answer back in Swahili, and then over time I'll speak to them in English, they will answer back in Swahili, and that really depressed me. I was so quiet in school. I wasn't participating in anything in school. I just come to class, go back to the house, come for preps, and that was more like a routine. Until one day, we have this Swahili teacher called Mrs. Rose Menjo. She looks at me and then tells me, find me after class. She was a guidance and counseling teacher at Alliance Girls High School. So I went to see Mrs. Menjo. She was so nice, very motherly, and she's a kind of person who will just intrigue you even to speak more about yourself. It's just a way in which she approaches you, the way she talks to you, the way she asks questions. It's just enough for you to open up, and that's what I did. I told her everything, where I was coming from, the kind of challenges I was facing in school, and she really did a great job in talking to me, always checking on me, making sure I'm fitting into the school, and even going ahead and to giving me a desk mate who was more or less similar to me, so that it was easy for me to fit in school. And she even encouraged me to do sports. She went ahead and asked me what I was so good in, and I told her I was good in volleyball, and she enrolled me into the volleyball club in school at that time. I was so good in volleyball, and she advised me to do well in academics, because the best thing to do is just to focus your energy on something you're good at, and that's what I did. So over time, it wasn't about the social classes of the students in school. It was about what best I can do for me to stand out. That goes a long way. We are in Form 4. I'm given academic sisters, because at that time I'd established myself in school. I was performing well. I was a volleyball captain at that time. So in my heart, I was like, finally I can be seen. That was the most important thing for me. It was just for me to fit in and finally feel like I can be seen. I have a voice, I can speak, people can listen to me. And that's what Mrs. Menjo did for me. Just starting from Form 1, we have the first visiting in school. Everybody's visited. I'm not visited. And it's not like I knew I was going to be visited. I just knew nobody was going to come, because first, at that time, the roads from Turkana to Nairobi were not so good. Usually, we used to take like 2 days for me to reach Nairobi, and I knew my mom doesn't know Nairobi. In fact, she used to confuse Starehe for Alliance. So she was not sure if I'm in Alliance or in Starehe Girls. So I knew nobody is going to come. So the first visiting goes, nobody comes for me. I remain in Alliance. We have a desperation corner where everyone is waiting for the parent. The parent comes, speaks the child, until I remained alone. I was like, Allah. So I think my classmates noticed, especially my best friend in school, Kasti Michoma. She noticed. Then the second visiting comes. We used to have 2 visitings per term. Then she calls me. I join her family. They are so good. They are very warm. And my relationship with Kasti goes a long way, because after that, we used to have half terms, 3 to 4 days. first half term I remained in school because we used to be given that option of remaining to school. The next half term comes, she texts me, she tells her mom Asinyan usually remains in school. So the mom requests if I can join Casti at home, and we went to, now the routine changed for me. Every visiting I was so sure I'm going with Casti. Half term comes, I'm going with Casti, and goes a long way because Casti becomes my academic sister together with other 3 girls. There was just something about me and people, because it's so easy for me to connect with people. It's so easy for me to understand people. So when we were given academic sister, I ended up having more academic sister than everyone else, because I have this thing in me whereby if we are to succeed, we are succeeding together and nobody's being left behind. I can accommodate people, and when we set goals as a group, that's what we are sticking up to. And for 4 years later down the line, we are all succeeding as sisters. Most of them will be graduating this year. When I finished high school, I remember the first 2 weeks after KCSE, I was in Nairobi at Kinakasti's place, and after that I went to Lodwar. So the same desperation that comes after every major exams, sets in. I'm so quiet. I remember my mom asking me, like, I was teaching her the grades, the grading system. If I get an A, it means I'm the best. If I get a B, C, D, like that. And then she was telling me, which grade are you going to get? Then me, I'm telling her, if I fail, I'm getting an A minor. And to my mom, that's a huge surprise. You're like, no, do not make unrealistic goals lest you become, disappointed later. Then me, I'm telling her, from what I've done in school, I know I will pass. And then she goes ahead and asks me, then what happens after the results? Then I told her, the first time KCP results came out, the option you had for me was for me to repeat. This time round, I don't know of any scholarship, after high school, because my scholarship for Wings to Fly was a secondary school kind of scholarship. So after Wings to Fly, I don't know. Then my mom tells me, the good thing is you're almost 19 and you will pass, and your story will be different from mine. At least if you get married at this time, you finished Form 4, and like me, I've never gone to school. So that's a good thing. A win is a win. So results came. I remember that day I was so scared. I was really scared for the results. But there's that kind of peace in the heart where I did my best. But I'm still scared. Results came out. In fact, the first person to see my results was Mama Casti, Dr. Edna Gisore of Aga Khan Hospital. She's the one who called me and told me, you've passed. And I've passed. I didn't even wait for my results. I started celebrating. Then I found myself I'm celebrating alone. Because at that time, getting a straight A of 82 points in Lodwar, it wasn't a big deal. Because people are not really used to academic excellence. So getting an A, I just found myself celebrating alone, because I'm the only one in my village who knows, the importance of getting an A. So everyone is like, oh, so what happens? So I tell my mom, it's not still a big deal. I'm the one who's celebrating alone. And from there, the normal kind of, it wasn't like a prolonged kind of excitement. It was just a short-lived excitement, because I was so sure everyone is going to university except me. Not because I failed in school, but because after that, another roadblock comes in. So after like 2 weeks, Equity Bank calls me. They tell me because I've passed, I qualified to get a paid internship for the bank for a whole year. That's like an opportunity to give you a starting point for me to raise money to go to school. And then I work for Equity Bank. I was so sure I was going to save a lot of money, only for me to realize I have a lot of responsibility back at home. I have 2 siblings in high school, county schools. I have to pay fees. I have my mom who is at home ill. Most of the time she's sick. So I become like the mother now at home. Until I remember one day the manager called me and told me, from what I'm seeing in your account, you're not saving any money. It's a good thing the circle is saving money. In Equity, we have like a welfare circle. So when you're working, if half of the money goes to the circle, then you're given half of the money of the salary. So that's what happens. And I talk to the manager. I work until August 31st. My contract with Equity expires. Then I speak again to the manager. I'm the big parent at home. So if my contract expires and for more university, I'll have to join university on 2020 and this is 2019, just extend the contract. My contract is extended until January, when I joined school, More University, School of Medicine. I stay in school for 2 weeks, Corona comes in. So we are supposed to go home, a whole year at home. I remember that year was very, very challenging for me because my mom was very, very sick at that time. So, and I had rented a house back in school. In my mind, I knew Corona was coming for 1 month and then you're just back to school because it's something new. I didn't know it will take a whole year. So I tell my roommate back at school, we will continue paying the rent because if we lose this house, there's just no way we'll get another house. So 10 months later, we are at home. We even stopped paying rent because we're like, why are we paying rent for a house you're not staying in? So that's when it's 2020 December. Yes. And that's when I realized I need to go to school. No money. I tried going to different organizations, asking for scholarship, presenting my exemplary performance, but that was not enough because I will go to an organization, they tell me write an application letter, I'll do, nothing comes around. I really tried, but it didn't go a long way. That's when I started now thinking, because one thing that really came to my mind is my A was not for Turkana County, definitely. My A was just for Kiambu, for Kikuyu, for Alliance, because that's when, my A was celebrated. So that's when I started looking on Facebook for groups, for Alliance, because at that time I didn't know so much groups where I can get to meet all the girls from Alliance. Until now, I managed to join, the Busharians doing great things. I joined that group. From there, Busharian Doctors Hub, and that's when I met Dr. Betty Gikonyo. One thing that, has worked with me is choices. Choices, every choice you make in life, it comes with a consequence. That's one rule I know, in life. Looking back at my mom, being a teen mother, and looking at the family I was brought in, I usually think of choices because my mom never went to school, and sometimes I usually think if only she went to school, or if only the grandparents knew the benefits of going to school, maybe my story would be different right now. So what I usually tell young people, it doesn't matter where you've been brought up, because if anything, I was brought up in a place where if I didn't have to make choices, probably I'll be in the same cycle, of my grandparents, my mom, me, the same. But one thing, you have to set your goal. You know what you want in this life, and the best thing is just, to take a leap of faith in everything you want to do, because nothing is impossible. Nothing, there's just nothing that you cannot do as long as you've set your mind to doing it. That's what I tell my siblings. My vision is just to finish medical school. I want to be a doctor. Probably I want to go back to Turkana County, work there, because I usually feel like that's where doctors are even more needed than any other place right now in Kenya, because we have few doctors, and Apart from that, it's the kind of impact you're going to leave to the people, it's the kind of service you're going to deliver, and it's even the kind of, encouragement and you're going to give around to the kids. And it's also about transforming lives and livelihoods through mentorship, through working with the kids, and even to the family, because I have like 5 siblings. So to them, I'm not just going to be a doctor, but a big sister. At the end of the day, I'm going to be a daughter, a granddaughter, and that's what I want to do. I also want to make sure that when I grow up, become a real doctor with, proper resources, I want to emphasize on mentorship, because growing up, what I really lacked the most was mentorship. 2021 I started a mentorship program with the help of Dr. Betty Gikonyo, where I do mentorships on academic excellence, girl child mentorship in primary schools. My intention is for the mentorship even to go to high schools in Turkana County, because that is starting from the basics. And apart from the mentorship, we are even looking forward to go deep into the villages, especially the village I was born in, Kalimapos in Kalokol. I'm looking forward, and I'm looking forward to get to Kalimapos and even impact very, very young girls, and even to talk to parents on the benefits of taking, girls to school. In my family, from my grandmother, my mom's, which is the 2nd generation, up to the 3rd generation, which is me and my siblings, nobody has gone to school apart from my mom's children. And to me, that is an achievement, because we've managed to break the cycle of, nobody going to school and, doing the normal things we've been doing over the years. And that's a great achievement that we've made, and that's one thing that I appreciate my mother for. Even though she never went to school, she managed to take 5 girls and 1 boy to school.